Did you do any prep work in this particular case?
With any case like this, typically we're having to look into the case details to determine what the best avenue of testing the evidence is, depending on the type of evidence, what we're looking for in a case.
Did you retrieve any items from the property and evidence for processing?
Most of the items I tested were prepared by our serologists in the lab. I did pick up 3 references.
All right. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 101 and ask if you recognize this.
Yes.
What is this?
This is a buccal swab from John Mello.
And how did you obtain this item?
I would have received it from our property and evidence department.
And sort of the same way that Ms. Burbage just testified to?
That's right.
And when you obtained this item, how did it appear to you?
So whenever I pick up evidence items, I check the packaging, make sure everything is properly sealed and labeled, and it was.
Was there any tampering or any kind of cuts on the items before you took it back? And if there was, would you have noticed that?
I would have.
And would you have documented that?
I would have.
And would you have tested it otherwise?
Most likely not.
And what is this? What is John Mello's swab? Your reference number now?
So I gave it, our item number is item 27.
27. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 10. That's already been admitted into evidence. Just get you to identify that.
Yes, this is a sealed package containing buccal swab from Bradley Post. This is this one you've handed me is DHE1. The one I tested was DHE, or I'm sorry, you handed me DH-E2. The one I tested was DH-E1.
Please, the court, Your Honor. One of them got admitted into evidence.
We can take a quick break.
There it is, Your Honor. Yeah, stuck over here. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 11.
Yes, I recognize this. This is our item 25, sealed package containing buccal swab from Post Bradley.
Okay. And did you collect this piece?
I obtained it at,
retrieve it.
I got it from our property and evidence department.
And when you retrieved it, did you inspect it?
Yes, I did.
And was it properly sealed?
It was.
And if it wasn't properly sealed, would you have noticed that?
Yes, I would have.
And would you have noted that in your documents?
I would have.
And would you have tested it?
No.
And finally, State's Exhibit 181. You recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
So this is a sealed package containing buccal swabs from Alex Fields, case item number JDS1.
And did you retrieve that from Property and Evidence?
I did.
And was it properly sealed?
Yes, it was.
Our state moves items 11, 181, and 101.
Your Honor, I would object to citing 901 for failure of property damage changes.
Your objection is noted for the record. I overrule and consistent with the cases of Hatcher and the other cases which I've mentioned earlier, 11, 181, and 101.
You guys, Exhibit 11, correct?
11, 181, and 101
Thank you.
are admitted into evidence.
All right, Mr. Nafsinger, I don't think I've moved to qualify you as an expert yet. Your Honor, I move to qualify Mr. Nafsinger as an expert.
Your man inquires in what the field is.
In DNA analysis.
No objection.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said with other experts, this witness will be qualified to testify in the area of DNA analysis, and he can give his opinion in that area. However, it does not mean that you must accept the opinion, but it is an evidence for you to consider and use in any way you see fit, and give it the weight and credibility that you feel is appropriate. You can consider it.
So, Mr. Nafsinger, tell us how you analyzed the items that you just referenced and the ones that in general, and that Ms. Burbage referenced as well.
So there's 4 basic steps to DNA analysis. So first is called extraction. We have to basically break the cells open and get the DNA out of the cells. And then we have to do a process called quantification, which is where we simply find out how much DNA is present in the sample. Then we do a process called amplification, which is where we make lots of copies of specific areas of DNA. And then we put those copies onto our genetic analyzer, which then produces a DNA profile. Then we have to interpret the DNA profile. DNA is a comparison science. The only way we can know whose DNA is present on an evidence item is if we have a known sample, such as a buccal swab, to compare to it.
Now, Ms. Burbage testified about taking clippings and swabs. Are those the items that you tested?
Yes, they are.
All right, and so, and I'm just going to go over, tell this jury the knowns that you tested in your reference item.
So I did a total of 6 reference items. Item 10A was a sample of buccal swab from Christina Parcell. Item 11A was sample of buccal swab from Michael Manigault. Item 12A was sample of buccal swab from Zachary Hughes. Item 25 was a sealed package containing buccal swab from Bradley Post. Item 26 was a sealed package containing buccal swabs from Alex Fields. And item 27 was a sealed package containing buccal swab from John Mello.
All right, so tell us, what is a reference sample?
So a reference sample is just a known sample of somebody's DNA. That's so that we can compare the profile that we get from that reference sample to whatever we find on the evidence.
And then those reference numbers that I'm referring to, are those just the numbers that you refer to in your report?
That's right.
And then you generate a report describing your findings?
That's right.
And then what do you call the items that you're trying to see if there's DNA matching to them?
So we'll call those questioned items because we don't know what we're going to find on them when we go to test them.
All right. And so in this case, what question items did you compare to? Compare the reference items to?
Well, I did quite a few items,
yeah.
a lot of them.
Okay, let's talk about it. So, about how many items do you think that you tested in this particular case?
Let me check my report.
And you can give an estimation.
More than 20, it looks like.
And so I'm going to refer you to your reference items 2A and, 5A and 6A. Can you tell Mr. Drew what those items are?
So item 5A is sample of swab from right handle brake of black Kona bicycle. And item 6A is sample of swab from left handle brake of black Kona bicycle.
Okay. And so just give another general description. In the lab, you've got, and this is 5A and 6A, the swabs of the black Kona bicycle. It is just a clipping of that swab that you're using.
That's correct.
And that is the swab that that Hannah Burbage process or prepared for you.
That's correct.
All right, and where did you get that swab from?
I got it from DNA Freezer 1 in the DNA lab.
Okay. And is that a secure location?
It is. The entire DNA lab is secure with only key card access, only accessible by the people who work there, and there's an alarm system. So.
Okay. And what measures do you instill to make sure that there's no cross-contamination from the reference samples?
So when I'm doing my extractions, the questioned items are extracted at a separate time and space than the known samples. So when I'm handling the questioned items, I have not handled any of the reference items yet. And so anytime I'm doing my processes manually, I'm only having one tube open at a time, and I'm only working question items, and then later I work the reference items. Later on, some of our processes involve robotics, and all our robotics have passed extensive validation tests that have also been audited when we get audited. And a part of those validation processes are contamination assessments, where we basically set it up to try to force it to contaminate and set up where we would very easily see if it did, and they've always passed. So.
And so do y'all have sort of safety measurements in place inside the lab to make sure there's no contamination or other issues arising out of the testing?
Yes. So in addition to those precautions, I'm obviously wearing protective equipment. So I've got a mask, gloves, a lab coat, change my gloves frequently. We also work with controls. So with every extraction batch, I have what's basically called a reagent blank, which is just an empty tube that I do everything to it, the same thing I'm doing to all the other samples, and I run it just like all the other samples to see if anything shows up in there, because we would see it if some DNA is being transferred between samples.
And do y'all have a peer review system?
We do.
And how does that work?
So we do 2 reviews. We have a technical review and an administrative review, and the main point of the review is another analyst who's fully qualified to do the same processes that I did, goes through and looks at all of my data, essentially reinterprets everything, makes sure they agree with all my conclusions, that they don't find any issues with what I did, and no report is released until it passes review.
So in reference to 5A handlebar, right handlebar Kona bike, in reference to 6A left handlebar of the Kona bike, did you compare that swab to your knowns in this particular case?
I did.
And what was your conclusions of that?
So for item 5A, which was a sample of swab from right handle brake of black Kona bicycle, my findings were the DNA obtained from item 5A is a mixture of a major male individual and at least one trace contributor. The major contributor matches the DNA of Zachary Hughes. A match between the DNA result of item 5A and the DNA of Zachary Hughes is approximately 2 septillion times more likely than a coincidental match to a random unrelated individual. Upon establishing Zachary Hughes as a contributor to this mixture based on the match statistics, Michael Manigault, Bradley Post, Alex Fields, and John Mello are excluded as contributors to the DNA obtained from item 5A. Due to limited data of the remaining alleles, there is no statistical support for an inclusion or exclusion between item 5A and Christina Parcell.
So what does that last part mean, inclusion or exclusion of Christina Parcell?
It basically means no conclusive determination can be made for this individual.
So now I'm going to refer you to your items 2A and 3A, 2A being the clippings of the right hand of Christina Parcell. Did you have the...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't fit the question.
I was just going to ask him if he compared that to the known references.
So I had items 2A and 3A. 2A was a swab of tips of fingernail clippings from victim's right hand. Item 3A was swab of tips of fingernail clippings from victim's left hand. Item 3A, PCR procedures for autosomal DNA analysis were not performed on item 3A due to the presence of large amounts of total DNA compared to male-specific Y chromosomal DNA. That is a case, basically, when we do our quant, or when we see how much DNA is there, we can see how much, in situations like this, we can see how much female DNA is present versus how much male DNA is present. And if it's too little, the next processes won't show up the male contributor because there's just too much female DNA. It's kind of like trying to hear your phone ring in a rock concert. It just gets overwhelmed. So at that point, we stopped with that sample.
So you're referring to the clippings of the left hand?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, and for reference, the items that you're dealing with are literally swabs. They're very tiny.
That's right.
All right. And so, did you have the occasion to test the clippings from Christina Parcell's right hand, which is your reference item 2A, to the knowns?
Yes, I did. So for item 5A, or I'm sorry, for item 2A, swab of tips of fingernail clippings from victim's right hand. My findings
Your
were...
Honor, and I'm going to object pursuant to Rule 403. It's our position this has no probative value based on their inability to properly establish chain pursuant to 901.
Your objection is noted for the record. Rule.
Good again, so
And
did...
just for the record, I find that Rule 403 is extremely probative and substantially outweighs any unfair prejudice. But your objection is noted on the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'll refer you back to clippings of the right hand 2A.
Yes.
And compared to our known references there.
So the DNA obtained from item 2A is a mixture of at least two individuals, a major female and a minor male. Assuming Christina Parcell is the major contributor to this mixture based on this being an intimate sample, a match between the minor DNA result of item 2A and the DNA of Zachary Hughes is approximately 825 million times more likely than a coincidental match to a random unrelated individual. Michael Manigault, Bradley Post, Alex Fields, and John Mello are excluded as contributors to the DNA obtained from item 2A.
So did you just tell this jury that Zachary Hughes' DNA is 825 million times more likely than a coincidental match to a random unrelated individual located under Christina Parcell's fingernails?
So what that stat means is it's called a likelihood ratio. And basically we're looking at two hypotheses as an explanation for the evidence profile that we find in the sample. So for every comparison, and we compared all the people to it, for every comparison, the first hypothesis is that this person's DNA is the best explanation for what we found on the evidence. And the other hypothesis is that it's somebody else in the random unrelated population. And so we're able to do statistics on this. And so it's kind of like sort of a seesaw effect. So when you have, for example, I read an inconclusive one recently. that's where it's kind of balanced, like it's not really tilting one way or another. If it's an exclusion, it means it's tilting toward someone in the random population is the better hypothesis to explain the evidence. And when it tilts the other way, which it did in this case, that's giving strong support for the hypothesis that that person's DNA is the best explanation for the evidence.
So what is the lowest probability standard that you would be permitted to report?
Per our lab policy, the lowest we'll report is a match score of 1,000.
And this one was 825 million.
That's correct.